Okay, so today we're going to talk about dimensional analysis and what dimensional analysis is in a practical sense. Okay, so what is dimensional analysis? What is dimensional analysis? Dimensional analysis is when we have to convert between multiple units of measure. Okay, um, we can convert between different units of measure within the same system, or we can convert between different units of measure in like two or more different systems. Okay. Sometimes in science and in science and in um, science and in math and in physics, like in biology and chemistry and stuff like that, we may have to do calculations where we have to do more than one conversion. This is where dimensional analysis comes in, because the point is to try to get a quick method to be able to do the calculation very quickly so that we can do what we need to do with that calculation, right? All right, so let me give you an example. Let's say we're dealing with time, for example, right? And we want to know how many seconds, how many minutes are in, let's say, one day. How many minutes are in one day, right? Now, if we were to do the regular conversion, it's going to take too long for us to do it, right? Like, because we would have to do 60 minutes. We have to do, well, how many minutes in an hour? How many minutes? Let me explain what I'm saying. So if we do it the regular way, and we say, oh, okay, well, 60 minutes is equal to 1 hour. There's 24 hours in one day, right? Then all we gotta do is say, okay, well, what's 24 by 60? And we can do it like this, right? And we will get the correct answer. We would say 1200, right? So what's 1200 plus 240? And we would get 144 minutes are in one day, right? This is correct. But let's say we did something where we said, a more complicated question where we said something like, well, how many minutes are in 1 month, right? If we do it like this, right, this is a time question, right? It's going to take way too long to do 60 minutes equals 1 hour, 24 hours equals 1 day, 7 days equal 1 week, 4 weeks equals to 1 month, right? It's going to take too long to do that, right? Because you would have to times 60 minutes equals 1 hour, times 24 hours equals 1 day, times 7 days equals 1 week, times 4 weeks into 1 month, right? So like this is a regular natural way, right? So there's a quicker way to do this, right? We would say, okay, there's 60 minutes in 1 hour, right? There's 60 minutes in 1 hour, right? Okay, there's 24 hours in 1 day, right? There's 7 days in 1 week, and there's 4 weeks in 1 month. So what you do is you cancel out the hour, like you cancel out the unit on the top, right? You cancel out the unit on the top. You cancel out the unit on the top, right? So now you're left with 60 times 24 times 7 times 4 minutes equals to 1 month. And then we do the calculation. Okay, 7 times 4 is 28. over 1, right? Okay, what is 60 times 24? Well, we already know up here that's 1440, right? It's 1440, right? Times 28. Right? So we do, what's 1440 times 28? Okay, 1440 times 28 is how much? Right? So we can do it like this. 0, 2, 3. 8 times 4 is 32, 35. 8 times 1 is 8, times 3 is 11,000. Right? 0, 0, 8. 0, yeah, 0, 8. 8, 2, 0, 2, 13, 10. Right, so it becomes 40,320 minutes per month. Right? Okay. Why do we do it like this? We do it like this because it's a quicker way to calculate the answer instead of having to do it, especially if you're doing something like, say if the question said, how many minutes are in 1 year? It would take way too long to do 60 times 24, times 7, that. So the point is, so that the reason why we do this is so that it's easier to be able to calculate what we need to calculate in a quicker fashion, right? That's the whole point, right? It's a more efficient way of calculation, right? Let's do another example. Let's say we did how many seconds are in let's say, for example, let me do that one. Let's say Mike drove 60 miles per hour, right? How many miles did he drive per second? Okay, something like this, right? So let's say we have 60 miles per hour, right? And we want to know how many miles did he drive per second. Okay, so this is what we do. We say, okay, he drove 60 miles per hour, right? Okay. There's 1 hour is 60 minutes, right? The reason why we put the hour on the top is because we're trying to cancel out the hour. We're trying to cancel this out. That's the point. We're trying to cancel out the hours, right? So 1 hour is 60 minutes, right? Okay. 1 minute is 60 seconds. Remember, we're trying to cancel out. We're trying to cancel out. We're trying to cancel out, right? We're trying to cancel out. We're trying to cancel out, right? So this comes this, right? So now we're left with, well, 60 miles, right? And we're left with, because 60 times 1 is 60, right? And then we're left with 60 times 60 times 1, right? 60 times 60 is 3,600, and 3,600 times 1 is 3,600. So we're left with 306,000 seconds, right? But the question asks, how many miles did he drive per second? So how many miles did he drive in 1 second, right? So we have to divide 60 divided into 3,600, So when we divide 60 divided into 3,600, this becomes 6 times 10, and this becomes 36 times 100. So 6 goes into 36 6 times, right? And 10 goes into 100 10 times. So what is 1 times 1? 1 times 1 is 1. What is 6 times 10? 6 times 10 is 60. So we know that we know that if we divide it, we know that he drove 1 mile, right? He drove 1 mile in 60 seconds, right? Now the question asks is how many did he drive in 1 second? How many times did he drive? So what you got to do now is say, okay, 1 mile is 60 seconds. So how many did he drive in 1 second? Right? Right? So we get 1/60th of a mile in 1 second. Right? So now, what is we get 1/60th of a mile. So now, what is 1/60th of a mile? Now, you can do it as a decimal, but it's just better to just keep it as a fraction because it's just simpler to just see, right? Some questions may ask, well, if we did write it as a decimal, what would it be? Some questions may ask that. For the purpose of this video, we're just gonna just leave it as a fraction, okay? Because it's just simpler, right? So basically, the answer is that Mike drove 1/60th. Mike drove 1/60th of a mile in 60 seconds, in 1 second, right? And how do we know this is true? How do we know this is true? Well, how do we know this is true? If he drove 1 mile in 60 seconds, right, then he's doing 1/60th times 60, right, in 60 seconds. So we know, well, what's 1/60th? This is per second, right? There's 60 seconds in 1 minute, right? There's 60 seconds in 1 minute. So if we want to, so to verify that what we're saying is correct, we do 1/60th times 60. Well, that's 60 over 60, which is 1, which is what we have here, right? Okay. The point in dimensional analysis is that we're trying to cancel out. We're trying to cancel out. We're trying to cancel out, right? We're trying to cancel out so that we can simplify it, okay? Another example. I don't know, Bob. Let's do it in the opposite direction. Bob drove 50 miles per hour, right? How many miles did he drive? Right? How many miles did he drive per minute? Okay, let's do it. We have 50 miles per hour, right? So this is 50 miles per hour, right? There is 1 hour and 60 minutes, right? We cancel out because we're trying to get the hour out. We're trying to eliminate the hour so that we only have the minute part, right? So now this cancels out. So now we're saying, well, right? The question is, how many miles did he drive per minute? Right? So we know that he drove 50 miles in 60 minutes. Right? So if we want to know how much he drove in 1 minute, we have to divide 50 divided by 60. Right? Or conversely, we can then say, well, how many miles did he drive in 1 minute? Right? So then we do 60x is equal to 50. right? Which is the same thing like here, which is the same thing, right? We can reduce this. So, right? So this becomes he drove 5/6 of a mile per minute. So the answer to this question is he drove 5/6 of a mile per minute. Let's recap. Why is it 5/6 of a mile? It's 5/6 of a mile because we're canceling out the hour because we want to get it where it's miles per minute, right? Miles to minute. So we have to cancel out the hour, right? So this becomes 50 miles in 60 minutes, right? But because the question asked and said, well, how much is it per minute? So for each minute, how much did he drive? So if we know that he drove 50 miles in 60 minutes, we have to figure out, well, how much did he drive in 1 minute? Because remember, per means for each. Per means for each. Per means for each minute, for every minute, right? So what we have to ask is say, well, okay, so if we know that he drove 50 miles in 60 minutes, we have to figure out how much did he drive in 1 minute, which means that we could write it as a proportion, and then we can solve it. So then this becomes 60x equals 50 over 60, and then we divide, which is the same thing here. And then we just divide 50 into 60. Now, since 50 over 60 can be reduced to 5/6 miles per minute, then that means that Bob drove 5/6 of a mile per minute, right? Again, we can write it as a decimal. We could if we wanted to, but we don't have to, right? The 5/6 is still right, right? 5/6 is still right. It's still correct, okay? Some teachers, or some places may say, depending on, who it is, or, they may say, oh, you must write it as a decimal. You don't have to, okay? The fraction itself is sufficient, all right? So, again, when we want to do dimensional analysis, right, what we have to do, the step-by-step procedure in order for us to do it is that in order for us to answer the question, depending on what the question asks, we have to cancel out the units. We have to cancel out the units, and then we have to figure out how much do we get it in each, if the question is saying for each second, like in this question, the question is saying per second, how much do we get it in 1 second, right? Because remember, per means for each, right? It's the same thing here. Bob drove 50 miles per hour. How much miles did he drive for each minute? So when they say for each minute, they're saying how much did they drive for 1 minute. And then we figure it out like that, okay? All right. Dimensional analysis can be a little bit confusing. It is a concept that takes a little bit of time to understand. All you got to do when you deal with this type of problem or you deal with this type of situation is that you just got to practice it. Over time, as you keep practicing it, you'll get better at it as you go along. All right, it's just practice. You just got to practice it as you go along. All right, so that's it. Thank you, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.